I believed that motherhood meant giving without limits. I believed love meant sacrifice, even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. And I believed my son when he stood in my kitchen, pale and shaking, and told me that if I didn't help him, he was going to die. My name is Charlotte, and at 45 years old, I thought I understood what unconditional love was. I thought I knew where the line was between devotion and destruction. I was wrong. 3 days after surgeons cut me open and removed a piece of my body, my son stood at the foot of my hospital bed and handed me an eviction notice. Not a thank you. Not tears. Not relief. Legal papers. That was the moment I realized I had never been his mother in this story. I had been his resource. Before I go any further, go ahead and like this video and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. It truly means more than you know to see this community of people who care about truth and family growing across the world. Every comment, every share helps us tell the stories people try to silence together. I woke up to the sound of machines breathing for me. A steady beep. A low hum. The kind of noise that reminds you your body is no longer fully yours. The ceiling above me was too white, the lights too bright, and the air smelled sharp, like antiseptic and metal. When I tried to move, pain exploded along my side, deep and burning, as if my body was protesting what had been taken from it. I gasped, my hand instinctively pressing against the bandage beneath the thin hospital gown, and that's when it all came back to me in fragments. The paperwork. The operating room. The way the surgeon's voice faded as the anesthesia pulled me under. And Liam's hand in mine. His grip had been tight, desperate. "Mom," he whispered, his eyes glossy with tears, "you're saving my life." I held on to those words as the pain settled into something dull and constant. I told myself this was the price of being a mother. That the fire in my side was temporary, but his life would be permanent. I stared out the window at the gray winter sky and tried to feel proud. Tried to feel at peace. I told myself that once I saw him, once I knew he was okay, everything would make sense. But the hours passed strangely. Nurses came and went, their voices soft, their smiles careful. Every time I asked about my son, there was a pause. Just a second too long. "He's resting," they said. "He's on another floor." Soon. Soon became a word with no meaning. No one would meet my eyes for very long. No one would give me a straight answer. And lying there, stitched together and weak, I started to feel something colder than fear creeping into my chest. My body looked like it had been through a war. A long surgical scar pulled at my skin every time I breathed too deeply. My mouth tasted like metal. My limbs felt heavy, useless. And yet, somewhere in this same building, my son was supposedly recovering from the same surgery. Only, he never came. He never called. He never sent a message. Not once did I hear, "She's awake," or "He asked about you." The silence pressed down on me harder than the pain ever could. By the third day, I was sitting upright in the bed, exhausted, sore, and hollowed out, trying to convince myself I was imagining things. That grief and medication were playing tricks on my mind. That love had simply made me impatient. Then the door opened. I looked up, expecting a nurse. Expecting answers. What I saw instead made my blood run cold. My son walked in wearing a crisp black suit, his hair perfectly styled, his posture straight and confident. He didn't look like a man who had survived surgery. He looked like a man closing a deal. And in his hands, he wasn't holding flowers or gratitude or relief. He was holding papers that would finish what the scalpel had started. Now, let's go back to how it all started. 5 years is a long time to lose a child who's still alive. That's how it felt with Liam, like a slow disappearance rather than a clean break. The calls stopped first. Then the holidays passed without explanations. I told myself he was busy, that young men pull away, that grief changes people after his father died. I made excuses because that's what mothers do when silence hurts too much. So when he showed up at my door one rainy afternoon, I didn't question the timing. I didn't question the trembling in his hands or the way he leaned too heavily on the doorframe like his legs might give out at any second. His skin looked sallow, almost gray, and there were dark circles under his eyes that made him look smaller, younger, fragile in a way that reached straight into my chest. He barely made it inside before he had to sit down, his breathing shallow, his forehead slick with sweat. "Mom," he said, voice breaking, I didn't know where else to go. I rushed to him, felt his bones under my hands when I hugged him, and when he told me the words stage 4 kidney failure, I felt the room tilt. He talked about doctors, about months, maybe less. About how he tried to handle it alone but couldn't anymore. At one point he slumped forward like he might faint, and I remember thinking that whatever had happened between us, none of it mattered anymore. All I could see was my son slipping away. Everything after that moved too fast and too slow at the same time. Hospital visits blurred together. Tests. Blood work. Consultations filled with terms I barely understood. When the doctor told us there was a possibility of a living donor, Liam looked at me with wet eyes and didn't even have to ask. I volunteered before the sentence was finished. They tested us, and when the results came back, the doctor smiled and said the word perfect. Perfect match. I laughed through tears and grabbed Liam's hand, feeling like maybe this was why he had come back. Like maybe this was our second chance. I signed what they put in front of me without hesitation. Page after page, initials and signatures, my name looping across the paper like a promise. I didn't read the fine print. I didn't ask questions. I was too busy imagining him alive, imagining us sitting at the same table again, imagining the empty rooms of my house filled with his presence instead of echoes. The surgery day arrived before I could catch my breath. The hospital was cold and smelled like disinfectant, and the halls felt endless as they wheeled me toward the operating room. Liam walked beside me for a while, holding my hand, his grip tight. He looked scared, grateful, almost reverent. "You're saving my life," he whispered as they stopped at the doors, and I told him it was nothing, that this was what mothers were for. The last thing I remember was the bright lights above me and the count backward that dissolved into darkness. When I woke up, pain was the first thing that greeted me. A deep, searing ache that wrapped around my side and made every breath feel deliberate. I was in the ICU, monitors blinking softly, machines humming like they were whispering secrets. Beneath the gown, I could feel the tight pull of stitches and the weight of a bandage covering a long scar that hadn't existed before. I pressed the call button with shaking fingers, my mouth dry, my head foggy. Nurses came and went, adjusting tubes, checking numbers, speaking gently. Every time I asked about Liam, the answer was the same. He was recovering. Another floor. Resting. I told myself it made sense. We'd both been through major surgery. Still, the hours stretched, and the room felt colder each time the door closed behind someone who wouldn't quite meet my eyes. By the second day, the pain had settled into something constant and exhausting. They helped me sit up, helped me stand, praised me for being strong. I clung to the idea that once I saw my son, once I knew he was okay, the fire in my side would mean something. Night fell early, the sky outside the narrow window turning dark and heavy. I lay awake listening to the machines and thinking about how quiet the house had been for 5 years, how I had kept his room the same, how I had waited. I told myself this was the end of that waiting. The third day came gray and silent. I was sitting up in bed when the door finally opened. Relief surged through me so fast it hurt. I smiled, started to say his name, and then I stopped. Liam stepped inside wearing an expensive suit, the kind I'd only ever seen him wear to job interviews. His shoes were polished. His hair was neatly styled. There was no hospital bracelet on his wrist, no bandage, no sign that he had been cut open and stitched back together. Behind him walked a woman with a leather briefcase and a practiced smile. Liam didn't rush to my side. He didn't ask how I was feeling. He stood there, looking down at me like I was something already decided. The woman opened her briefcase and handed him an envelope. He placed it carefully on the bed beside my hand. "These are for you," he said, his voice calm, distant. I stared at the envelope, then at him, my heart pounding. When I opened it, the words blurred together at first, but one phrase burned through the fog. Eviction notice. My fingers trembled as I tried to understand what I was reading. I looked up at my son, waiting for him to laugh, to tell me this was a mistake. He didn't. He explained, almost casually, that the house was his now. That the documents I'd signed before surgery had transferred ownership. That arrangement had been made for me to move into a care facility once I was discharged. A cheap one, he added, like it was a favor. I asked him why. I reminded him of the surgery, of the scar burning beneath my gown, of the piece of myself I had given him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't look ashamed. He just said, "There was no surgery for me, Mom. I was never sick." And in that moment, as the room seemed to shrink around us, I understood that the worst pain I would feel that day had nothing to do with the wound in my side. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and unreal. I was never sick. For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood him. That shock does strange things to the mind. It reaches for logic even when logic has already left the room. I searched his face for a crack, a flicker of guilt, anything that would tell me this was cruelty layered on fear, not truth. But Liam's expression didn't waver. He looked calm, settled, like a man who had already rehearsed this ending and was simply waiting for his cue. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. My throat felt tight, as if the air itself had thickened. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, a dull roar that drowned out the hum of the machines. I looked down at the envelope again, as if the paper might rearrange itself into something kinder if I stared long enough. It didn't. The words stayed sharp and final. "You're confused," I finally managed. My voice sounded distant to me, like it belonged to someone else. "You just had surgery. You're on medication." Liam exhaled slowly, almost patiently, the way you do when explaining something obvious to a child. "No, Mom. I didn't have surgery. You did." He glanced at his watch, then at the woman beside him, as if checking an internal schedule. "I didn't want to do this here, but timing matters." Timing. The word scraped against me. I pressed my hand to my side again, feeling the tight pull of stitches, the deep ache that flared every time I moved. "If you weren't sick," I said, each word a struggle, "then why am I here? Why did they take my kidney?" For the first time, something like amusement touched his eyes. Just a hint. Enough to make my stomach drop. "Because you were a match," he said. "And because you trusted me." The woman with the briefcase shifted her weight, clearly uncomfortable but not surprised. She had the look of someone who had seen scenes like this play out before and knew better than to intervene. I wanted to scream at her, to ask how she could stand there while my life collapsed, but my gaze kept returning to my son. My child. The person I had built my world around. "I did this for you," I whispered. "I could have died. But you didn't," he replied. "And you'll recover. The doctors said so." The casual way he said it, like he was talking about a scraped knee instead of a missing organ, snapped something inside me. "Where is my kidney?" I asked. The question felt obscene, like asking about a stolen heirloom or a body part left behind at a crime scene. He didn't answer right away. He looked toward the door, then back at me, as if gauging how much time he had left. "That's not really your concern anymore." Before I could respond, before I could push past the fog of shock and demand the truth, the door to the room slammed open with a force that made all of us jump. The sound echoed off the walls, sharp and sudden, cutting through the tension like a blade. A woman strode in, her movements fast and purposeful, her white coat flaring behind her as if she were carrying a storm with her. Her dark hair was pulled back tightly, and her eyes were blazing with a fury so focused it felt almost physical. She didn't look at me at first. She didn't acknowledge the woman with the briefcase. Her gaze locked onto Liam with an intensity that made him stiffen where he stood. "Stop," she said. Her voice was steady, controlled, but there was something underneath it, anger held on a short leash. "Don't take another step." Liam turned toward her, irritation flashing across his face. "Doctor, this is a private matter." "There is nothing private about organ trafficking," she replied, and the words landed like a gunshot. The room went silent. Even the machines seemed to pause, as if they, too, were listening. I looked from her to Liam, my heart hammering. "What is she talking about?" I asked. My voice sounded thin, fragile. "What do you mean?" The woman finally turned to me then, and when she did, the fury in her eyes softened just enough for something else to show through. Regret. "Mrs. Charlotte," she said gently, "my name is Dr. Rebecca Stone. I'm the head of transplant surgery at this hospital." Liam let out a short laugh. "This is ridiculous. You can't just walk in here making accusations." Dr. Stone didn't take her eyes off him. "Sit down," she said. "Or don't. But you're not leaving." I felt like the ground had dropped out from under me. "Dr. Stone," I said, gripping the edge of the bed, "please tell me what's going on." She took a step closer, lowering her voice. "Your son was never diagnosed with kidney failure," she said. "Not here. Not anywhere." The words didn't make sense at first. They slid past my mind without sticking. "No," I said. "That's not possible. I saw the tests. The charts. The doctors told us." "They were falsified," she interrupted gently. "The records were forged." Liam's jaw tightened. "You can't prove that." Dr. Stone reached into the pocket of her coat and pulled out a tablet. With a few swift movements, she turned the screen toward him. "There is no record of you ever being admitted as a patient," she said. "No dialysis appointments. No blood work consistent with kidney failure. Nothing." Color drained from his face so quickly it was startling. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring. Then why am I here?" I whispered. "Why did they operate on me?" Dr. Stone took a slow breath. "Because your kidney was needed," she said. "Just not by your son." The room tilted. I gripped the bed rail, my fingers numb. "Where is it?" I asked again, my voice barely audible. "It was transplanted into another patient," she said. "A man who was actually dying." Liam took a step back. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about," Dr. Stone snapped. "Because I reviewed the case personally once discrepancies started appearing. Your son orchestrated an illegal private transplant. He sold your kidney." The word "sold" echoed in my head, hollow and obscene. "Sold," I repeated. "For how much?" Dr. Stone didn't hesitate. $500,000. The number hit me harder than any physical blow. I felt something inside me collapse, something essential and irreplaceable. I looked at Liam, waiting for him to deny it, to say she was lying. He didn't. His eyes dropped to the floor. "Is that true?" I asked. My voice broke. "Did you sell my kidney?" Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Finally, he shrugged. "It was a business arrangement." A sound escaped me then, something between a laugh and a sob. "You used me," I said. "You cut me open. You took my body and my home and sold me like I was nothing." Dr. Stone stepped between us slightly, her presence protective now. Mrs. Charlotte, she said softly, I'm so sorry you had to find out this way. I shook my head, tears spilling down my cheeks. Why? I asked him. Why would you do this? He looked up then, meeting my eyes for the first time since she'd entered the room. There was no remorse there. No shame. Just a cold, detached certainty. Because I could, he said. Those 3 words landed with a finality that stole my breath. Because I could. Not because he was desperate. Not because he was afraid. Because he could. Dr. Stone straightened, her expression hardening again. I made a call before I came in here, she said. Federal authorities are on their way. Organ trafficking is a serious crime, and this hospital will not be complicit. Liam laughed, sharp and brittle. You think I'm scared? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The sound of footsteps in the hallway answered for her. The door opened again, this time more quietly, and 2 men stepped inside. They were dressed plainly, but the badges clipped to their belts caught the light. One of them scanned the room, his gaze assessing, controlled. The other's eyes went straight to Liam. Liam, the taller one, said, You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit unlawful organ trafficking, fraud, and elder exploitation. For the first time, real fear flashed across my son's face. Wait, he said. This is a misunderstanding. The agent stepped forward, producing handcuffs. Turn around, sir. Liam looked at me then, panic creeping into his voice. Mom, he said, tell them they're wrong. Tell them. I stared at him, at the boy I had raised, the man who had looked at me and seen a transaction. My chest ached, but something else settled over me too, a strange, steady calm. I said nothing. I turned my head away and looked out the window at the gray sky beyond the glass. The sound of the handcuffs closing was loud in the small room. A metallic click that echoed long after it faded. Liam protested, his voice rising, but it all sounded far away to me, like noise from another life. Dr. Stone placed a gentle hand on my arm. You're safe now, she said quietly. I didn't respond. I just watched as they led my son out of the room, watched as the door closed behind him, sealing the end of something I had believed in my entire life. The machines resumed their steady rhythm. The room felt emptier than before. And as I lay there, stitched together and hollowed out, I realized that the surgery hadn't been the worst thing to happen to me. It was the truth. The door closed behind them with a soft, almost polite click, and that was it. No dramatic slam. No final outburst. Just the quiet confirmation that something irreversible had happened. The room felt too large afterward, like the walls had moved farther away, leaving me exposed in the middle of it all. The machines picked up their steady rhythm again, beeping and humming as if nothing extraordinary had just taken place. As if a son hadn't been taken away in handcuffs for selling his mother piece by piece. I stayed exactly where I was, staring at the pale winter light bleeding through the window. I could still hear his voice in my head, the way it cracked when he said, Mom, the way he expected that single word to undo everything. It didn't. Something inside me had gone quiet the moment the cuffs clicked shut. Not numb. Not empty. Just finished. Dr. Stone stood near the foot of the bed, her shoulders finally lowering now that the storm had passed. The fury that had carried her into the room faded into something heavier, something that looked a lot like exhaustion. She glanced at the doorway once more, then turned back to me. I'm so sorry, she said again, softer this time, like she knew the words couldn't possibly be enough, but offered them anyway. I nodded, though I wasn't sure what I was agreeing to. The apology. The reality. The fact that my life had split cleanly in two, before this moment and after. My throat burned, but I refused to cry. Tears felt too small for what had just been taken from me. They'll process him downstairs, she continued gently. There will be interviews. Statements. You'll be asked to cooperate. I will, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. Whatever you need. She studied my face for a moment, as if gauging whether I truly understood what that meant. Then she nodded. Good. You've already been through enough, but your testimony matters. After she left, the room fell into a different kind of silence. Not the tense, waiting silence from before, but a hollow one. Nurses came in quietly to check my vitals, their movements careful, respectful. Word had traveled fast. I could see it in their eyes now, not avoidance, but sympathy. Some of them looked angry on my behalf. Others looked heartbroken. No one asked about my son. Time blurred again after that. I drifted in and out of sleep, waking to pain, to the dull ache in my side, to the echo of metal clicking shut. When night came, it brought a heavy stillness with it. The city lights outside the window shimmered against the dark, distant, and unreachable. I wondered where Liam was now, what room he was sitting in, what excuses he was already crafting. Then I stopped wondering. That part of my life felt closed, like a book I had finally set down after reading too many painful chapters. The next morning, a nurse helped me into a chair by the window. My legs shook under my weight, my body protesting every movement. Healing, they told me, would take time. I believed them. Some wounds were deeper than others. Later that afternoon, there was a knock at the door. Not the brisk, professional knock of hospital staff, but something more hesitant. I looked up, expecting another doctor or an agent. Instead, a man stood in the doorway who did not belong to this world of white walls and humming machines. He was tall, thin in a way that spoke of recent illness rather than neglect, dressed in a tailored suit that looked expensive without being flashy. His hair was silver at the temples, his face pale but alert, his eyes sharp and alive. He hesitated, then stepped inside slowly, as if mindful of the space he was entering. My name is Jonathan Langford, he said quietly. May I come in? I recognized the name immediately. Everyone did. The tech billionaire whose company's name was stitched into the city itself. The man whose face appeared on magazine covers, usually smiling, usually invincible. He looked neither of those things now. He looked human. Fragile. Grateful. Yes, I said after a moment. You can. He closed the door behind him and approached the chair opposite my bed, lowering himself into it carefully, like someone who knew pain intimately. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us felt different, heavy, but not cruel. I was told the truth yesterday, he said finally. About the transplant. About you. I looked down at my hands resting in my lap, the faint tremor still there. I didn't know who you were, I said. I didn't even know there was someone else. I know, he replied. And I'm so sorry. His voice caught just slightly. I was told the donor was your son. A young man who wanted to remain anonymous. I let out a slow breath. That sounds like him, I said bitterly. Or at least the version he wanted you to believe. Jonathan's jaw tightened. When Dr. Stone told me the truth, I was horrified. I wanted to come see you immediately, but they said you needed rest. I'm still resting, I said. Just not the way they meant. A faint, sad smile crossed his face. I've been sick for a long time, he said. Longer than most people know. I had months left. Maybe less. He paused. Your kidney saved my life. The words landed softly, without spectacle. No drama. Just fact. I didn't know what to do with them. I didn't choose that, I said. I didn't even know. And yet, he replied, you did it. He leaned forward slightly. I owe you more than I can ever repay. I shook my head. I don't want money, I said quickly. The thought made my stomach turn. I've already paid enough. He nodded. I know. That's not why I'm here. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a simple card, placing it on the small table beside my bed. I'm offering you a place, he said. Not charity. Not repayment. A place where you're wanted. I looked at the card but didn't touch it. I don't understand. My home, he said. On Lake Michigan. I have grandchildren. Bright kids. Curious. They need someone patient. Someone steady. He met my eyes. I was hoping that might be you. The room felt suddenly too warm, too full. You don't even know me, I said. I know enough, he replied gently. I know you gave something irreplaceable without asking for anything in return. I know you stood up in a room full of men and watched your son be taken away because it was the right thing to do. He paused. And I know what it's like to be alone. I swallowed hard. Loneliness. The word cracked something open in me. I don't know if I can do that, I said honestly. I don't know who I am anymore. That's all right, he said. You don't have to decide today. Or tomorrow. He stood carefully, adjusting his jacket. Just know the offer stands. As he reached the door, he turned back once more. You didn't just save my life, he said. You reminded me what it means to be human. After he left, I picked up the card with trembling fingers. The name was printed simply, along with an address overlooking the lake. I stared at it for a long time, then looked out the window at the city below. For the first time since waking up in that hospital bed, I felt something other than pain and betrayal settle into my chest. The card stayed on the table beside my bed long after Jonathan Langford left. I didn't pick it up again right away. I didn't need to. I had already memorized the way it looked, the weight of it, the quiet certainty in his voice when he said the offer would stand. The room felt different after he was gone, less hollow somehow, like a window had been cracked open in a place I thought was sealed forever. Still, I didn't let myself hope too quickly. Hope had betrayed me before. The days that followed were filled with paperwork, questions, and long conversations that left me drained in ways painkillers couldn't touch. Federal agents came in pairs, polite but relentless, asking me to recount everything from the moment Liam showed up at my door 5 years ago to the instant the handcuffs closed around his wrists. I told them the truth, even when it made my chest ache, even when saying his name out loud felt like reopening a wound. I didn't protect him. I didn't soften the edges. I spoke plainly because for the first time in my life, I understood that love without honesty is just another kind of lie. Recovery was slow. Slower than the doctors had predicted. My body healed in fits and starts, the scar on my side pulling and burning as nerves woke up and protested their loss. Physical therapy was humbling. Every step reminded me of what had been taken from me without my consent. And yet, with every small improvement, something else inside me grew steadier. I wasn't rushing anymore. I wasn't chasing after someone who didn't want me. I was learning how to sit with myself in the quiet and not feel like I was disappearing. The hospital eventually discharged me with a folder full of instructions and a future that felt terrifyingly open. I didn't have a home to return to. The house I'd raised my son in, the walls I'd painted, the garden I'd tended, all belonged to him now, tied up in legal proceedings that would take months, maybe years, to resolve. I didn't fight it. Not because it didn't matter, but because I was tired of bleeding for things that refused to bleed for me in return. I stayed in a short-term recovery facility for a while, the kind Liam had casually mentioned as if it were my final destination. It wasn't luxurious, but it was quiet, and the staff treated me like a person, not a problem. From there, I watched winter loosen its grip on the city, snow giving way to gray slush, then to bare sidewalks and stubborn patches of green. Life, it seemed, was moving forward whether I was ready or not. Jonathan Langford kept his word. He didn't pressure me. He didn't send reminders. Once a week, his assistant called to check in, always kind, never insistent. The offer still stands, she'd say before hanging up. Each time, I thanked her and stared at the phone afterward, my heart racing with questions I didn't yet have answers to. It was Dr. Stone who finally pushed me to decide, though she would never frame it that way. She visited one afternoon, her white coat swapped for a sweater, her posture relaxed for the first time since I'd met her. We sat together while the sun poured through the window, warming the room. "You did the right thing," she said quietly. "I know it doesn't feel like it yet." "I don't regret telling the truth," I replied. "I regret believing a lie." She nodded. "That's human." She hesitated, then added, "You're allowed to choose yourself now." The words followed me long after she left. 2 weeks later, I packed a single suitcase. Not because that was all I owned, but because it was all I wanted to bring with me into whatever came next. When Jonathan's driver picked me up, I felt like I was stepping into someone else's life, borrowing it carefully, afraid to leave fingerprints behind. The estate sat along Lake Michigan, quiet and expansive without being cold. The water stretched endlessly beyond the windows, gray and restless, like it was always thinking about movement, about change. Jonathan greeted me at the door himself, moving more slowly than before, but with color in his face I hadn't seen in the hospital. "You came," he said, and there was no expectation in his voice, just warmth. "I did," I replied. "For now." "For as long as you like," he said. Living there felt strange at first. Too much space. Too much silence. I woke in the night more than once, disoriented, expecting to hear the familiar creaks of my old house, the echo of memories I'd left behind. Instead, I heard the lake, steady and patient, reminding me that even the largest bodies of water are always changing. The children were what grounded me. Jonathan's grandchildren were nothing like Liam had been at their age. They were curious, loud, unfiltered in their affection. They asked questions without fear, laughed without restraint, and accepted me without hesitation. When they called me by my name at first, I corrected them gently, insisting they didn't owe me anything. When they started calling me something else on their own, something warmer, I didn't stop them. Teaching them filled my days in ways I hadn't known I was missing. We worked through homework at the long dining table, argued over books, celebrated small victories. I watched them grow braver, more confident, and in their progress, I felt something inside me heal. They didn't need my blood. They needed my presence. And that was something I could finally give without losing myself. The trial came in late spring. I didn't attend every session, but I testified. Standing in that courtroom, facing Liam across the room, was harder than I'd expected. He looked smaller there, stripped of the confidence that had once shielded him. When our eyes met, I searched for recognition, for regret. I didn't find it. And in that moment, I understood that closure doesn't always come from the other person. Sometimes it comes from choosing not to keep looking. When the verdict was read, I felt no triumph. Just a quiet finality. Justice isn't loud when it's real. It settles. It stays. Afterward, I returned to the lake, to the children waiting with stories and questions and dinner plans. Life didn't erase what had happened. It absorbed it, reshaped itself around it. One evening, months later, Jonathan and I sat on the terrace, watching the sun sink into the water. The sky burned gold and pink, the surface of the lake catching fire in response. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked gently. "The donation." I thought about it for a long time. About the scar on my side. About the years I'd spent waiting for a version of my son that never existed. About the room where handcuffs clicked shut and a door closed forever. "I regret trusting the wrong person," I said finally. "But I don't regret kindness. I don't regret choosing love, even if it cost me." He nodded, as if he understood more than words could explain. That night, as I stood in front of the mirror, tracing the faded line along my side, I realized something I hadn't been able to name before. The scar wasn't just a reminder of what I'd lost. It was proof of what I'd survived. I hadn't found my way back to the life I'd planned. I'd found my way into a different one. A quieter one. A truer one. Home, I learned, isn't where you're born. It isn't even where you've lived the longest. Home is where you are seen, where you are valued, where your presence matters more than what you can give. And standing there, whole in a way I hadn't been before, I finally understood that choosing yourself is not abandonment. It's survival. A year passed without me noticing the exact moment it began. Time didn't announce itself with milestones anymore. It moved quietly, measured in ordinary mornings and small rituals that slowly stitched a new life together. By the time spring returned to the lake and the air softened, I realized I was no longer counting days since the hospital, since the courtroom, since the moment everything fell apart. I was counting something else instead: laughter at the breakfast table, lessons finished before dinner, the way the house filled with noise at exactly the hours it used to feel emptiest. The children had grown in ways that felt sudden and gradual all at once. Their questions became sharper, their opinions louder. They argued over homework and teased one another relentlessly, then collapsed into giggles 5 minutes later. They began calling me without thinking, their voices drifting down hallways, looking for reassurance or approval or simply company. I never corrected them. I never had to. Belonging, I learned, doesn't require permission. My body had healed as well as it ever would. The scar on my side faded from angry red to a pale, thin line, a quiet reminder I no longer hid from the mirror. Some days it pulled when I moved too quickly, when I forgot my limits. Other days, I barely noticed it at all. Pain had become a background hum rather than the center of my existence. And in that softening, I felt something else ease too, the constant vigilance, the need to prove my worth through sacrifice. Jonathan's health continued to improve. He walked farther each morning along the edge of the lake, his pace slow but steady, his breathing easier than it had been when we first met. We spoke often, not about what had happened, but about what was happening. About the future. About the strange, fragile luck that had brought us together under circumstances neither of us would have chosen, but both of us had grown from. There was no debt between us, no unspoken imbalance. Just gratitude on both sides, quiet and mutual. Letters came from time to time with Liam's name printed neatly on the envelope. At first, I couldn't bring myself to open them. Then, one afternoon, I realized I didn't feel the urge to anymore. I didn't need answers from someone who had never been willing to tell the truth. I handed the unopened envelope to Jonathan, who accepted it without question and set it aside. Some doors, I understood, are meant to stay closed. The house by the lake had become mine without anyone ever saying so. My books filled the shelves. My routines shaped the days. I planted herbs by the kitchen window and watched them thrive. In the evenings, when the children were asleep and the house finally settled, I sat by the water and let the quiet wrap around me, not as loneliness, but as peace. One afternoon, as we prepared dinner together, one of the children looked up at me with a question about a math problem, her brow furrowed in concentration. I leaned in, patient, steady, guiding her through it step by step. When she smiled in understanding, something warm spread through my chest, something deeper than pride. Purpose, maybe, or simply presence. That night, gathered around the table, laughter rose easily. Stories overlapped. Plates were passed. I watched them, all faces lit softly by the glow of the room, and felt a certainty settle into me that no legal document, no blood tie, had ever given me before. I belonged here, not because of what I had lost, not because of what I had given, but because I was wanted. Later, standing alone in my room, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked older than I had a year ago, but not in the way I'd feared. There was strength there now, clarity, a calm I hadn't known before. I traced the scar once more, not with bitterness, but with acknowledgement. I had spent much of my life believing family was defined by biology, by obligation, by the idea that love meant enduring anything. I had learned the hard way that love without respect is not love at all. It is consumption. And I had learned something else, too, something far more freeing. Family is not where you are born. It is where you are valued. As the night settled over the lake and the house grew quiet, I turned off the light and lay down, surrounded by a life I had not planned but had chosen. And for the first time in a very long time, I slept without waiting for something to be taken from me. If this story touched you in any way, I want you to pause for a moment and listen closely. If you've ever given everything to someone who treated you like you were disposable, if you've ever been made to feel guilty for finally choosing yourself, you are not alone. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that their worth is not measured by how much they sacrifice. Leave a comment and tell me, have you ever had to walk away from someone you love to save yourself? And if you believe that healing is possible, that chosen family is real, and that it's never too late to start over, subscribe and stay with this community. We're building a space where truth matters, where boundaries are respected, and where broken stories don't end in silence.